Hello friends, and welcome back to Tammy's Yarn House. Today we are going to learn how to make a rectangle granny square blanket, or you've probably seen these labeled as a modern granny square blanket. And we've got these granny square clusters, which gives it its famous little name. Okay, I have chained up 22 for a baby blanket in the beginning. If you wanted to make this granny rectangular blanket for a throw or something larger, you would want to do 31 chains. But for a baby blanket, we are going to do 22 chains. That gives us a little bit, because the blanket's smaller, you know, it gives us a little bit of a smaller in the middle. All right, so here's what we do. We've got our chains made. We are going to do double crochet into the 4th chain from the hook. Okay, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4. And if you turn over and get that back bump, I'm going to put a double crochet in there. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4th chain from the hook. And what we're working in here is a granny cluster. What a granny cluster is 3 double crochets in the same space. Because these skipped chains right here count as a stitch, we need one more double crochet in here, and that's our first granny cluster right there. Okay, this is going to be our corner, so we're going to chain 1, and we're going to work 2 more granny clusters into this same chain right here. So that's 3 double crochets in the same space is a granny cluster. And because we're making a corner, we are going to chain 1. Now we're going to make a 3rd granny cluster. And there's our corner. Okay, now all the way through to the end, we are going to skip 2 and work a granny cluster into the 3rd stitch. Okay, so that's 1, 2, work a granny cluster into the 3rd, which is going to be your 3 double crochets together. Skip 2, work a granny cluster into the 3rd, and if you can hear my hook going across my yarn, this is, I'm using a more inexpensive yarn, and let me talk about that for just a second. So you have an inexpensive yarn, and when you're in the store and you feel it and it feels scratchy, please don't let that turn you off from using that yarn, because I don't know what they put on that yarn to make it go through the machinery easier, because you know, this is going through machinery at lightning speed, and that friction can cause a fire, right? So I don't know if they put something on the yarn in order for it to go through the machines a lot easier, but as soon as you wash that yarn, it softens right up. So please don't let scratchy yarn shy you away from working with it. You'll hear a little bit of noise when you're working it up, or it might not feel the greatest, but boy, when you wash it, it'll soften right up. Okay, let's continue. You're going to skip 2 and work a granny cluster in the 3rd, and do that all the way to the end, and I'll meet you at the end and we'll work another corner. Okay, here we are at the very end, and you know your count is correct if you've got 3 stitches left, and we do. 1, 2, 3. And we are going to work in this 3rd. We're going to work a corner, just like we did in the beginning. We're going to work 3 granny clusters in that 1st chain right here. So 3 granny clusters, That's 3 double crochets in the same. So that's 1, 2, 3. That's our first cluster. Chain 1. Now let's do our second cluster. There's our second cluster. Now let's chain 1, and let's do our third cluster. And there's our corner. So here's what we look like so far. We've got our corners made. We've got one of our long sides made. Now we need to work on the other side. All right, so here's what you can do with your tail. If you lay your tail across your work as you work, then you don't have to weave it in at the end. And if I can work my tail in and not have to weave it in, I'm going to do it each and every time. Weaving in tails is the bane of my existence, okay? So we've got our corner. Now we're going to start. And one thing that I didn't mention that I should probably mention right now is when we were working along the sides of our granny cluster, I did not chain 1 in between these. You never chain in between your granny clusters when you're working along your sides. It's only in the corners when you're making a corner will you do your granny cluster, chain 1, and granny cluster. Okay, I'm going to do a couple of these rounds with you so that you can really see what I'm talking about there. But as we start working down this row, notice I am not going to put a chain 1 in between my clusters. All right, so here we go. We are going to go into the bottom of our granny cluster from the row below. Okay, we're going to work a granny cluster. Just lay your tail across there. 1, 3. There we go. Skip on down to your next one and just start working your granny cluster in here. And that's our 3 double crochets together. And once our tail has been crocheted in enough, you can drop it. Because now we can just cut it off right there. We can just cut that off. It's already crocheted in. It's not going anywhere. It's not going to come out. Okay, let's finish our granny clusters along this side. And we got one more to go. Okay, now we're at the end. We're going to slip stitch at the top of this chain. So at the very top of that chain, slip stitch to bring this together. And there is the very, very beginning of our rectangle granny blanket. Now, if you notice, we're not really at a good space to start another round. We have to be in a corner, right? So we're in a little bit of an awkward space. So we have to get down to that corner. And that means that we're going to slip stitch down to get into that corner. And slip stitch in the corner. Okay, now we're in a space where we can start to make another round. And here's what is the pattern is going to be. It's a 2-row repeat. We are going to make a foundation of chains and single crochets, and that is going to give us the foundation to build more granny clusters onto. Okay, so here's how we do that. You're going to single crochet We just slip stitched in there, but you're going to go back in that and single crochet, chain 3. Now this is our corner, so we're going to go back in here and single crochet again. So we got that little space. We're going to chain 3, and that chain 3 is to accommodate that cluster because it's going to lay. It's going to lay over it. So let's go into our next corner, anchor that chain 3 with a single crochet, chain 3. Because it's a corner, we're going to go back in there with a single crochet. See that? And we're going to chain 3. And remember, these chain 3s are always going to accommodate the granny clusters. They match up. And you're going to anchor those chain 3s in between your granny clusters. That's how you do your foundation row. So chain 3, and we're going to anchor it in between our granny clusters, so that way our chain 3 space is directly above, and this is where we're going to build our next granny cluster in our next row. So do this all the way down. Chain 3, anchor with a single crochet, chain 3, anchor with a single crochet, and I'll meet you at the end and we'll turn another corner together. Okay, here we are at our corner. We've already chained our 3 to accommodate this cluster. We're going to go into this corner with a single crochet, chain 3, and single crochet into this corner. 1, 2, 3. Back in with a single crochet. We have a granny cluster here. We have to accommodate that with a chain 3. Here's our next corner. Single crochet, chain 3, single crochet into this corner space. Right back in here. And we start our foundation row again. Chain 3, single crochet, chain 3, single crochet. Do that all the way to the end, and I'll show you how to join. Okay, here we are at the end. We have chained 3 to accommodate this cluster right here. We're going to slip stitch in the first single crochet right here. We're going to slip stitch to join in the first single crochet of that corner. Okay, and then in order to start our next round, we're going to slip stitch into that corner space. Now here's what we've done. We've done our first round of granny clusters, and we have went around and made our chain 3 spaces to accommodate another round of granny clusters. So here's how you start another round of granny clusters. We're in the corner already. We are going to put a granny cluster, a chain 1, and another granny cluster into this space right here. We're going to start by chaining 3, and then 2 double crochets, chain 1, and we're going to do another granny cluster into that same corner space. And that's what you do in the corners. That's how you make a corner. Always with a granny cluster, chain 1, granny cluster. Every time you see one of these chain 3s, you put a granny cluster there. That's our foundation for the granny clusters. That's why we made them. Okay, we're back at a corner. And you guessed it. I'm sure you guessed it right. Granny cluster, chain 1, granny cluster in this corner. So let's turn this corner. Three, chain 1, and another granny cluster. I'm going to show you how to do a color change too. Okay, we've made our first, and what we're going to do is in each one of these chain spaces all the way down, we're going to put granny clusters. So put your granny clusters all the way down, and I'll meet you at the next corner. Okay, here we are in our next corner. We're going to do granny cluster, single crochet, and a granny cluster. Chain one, and another granny cluster. Okay, we've got a chain three right here. What do we do with chain threes? Put a granny cluster there. And we're back at a corner. Granny cluster, chain one, granny cluster into this corner. Okay, so here we are. Here's what we have. We've made our corners. We made our granny clusters. Right? Your corners are made up of granny cluster, chain one, granny cluster. Right? So now what we're going to do is we're going to continue down with putting granny clusters all through. Meet me here at the end, and if you're interested in knowing how to change your color, I'll show you how to change your color here at the end. Okay, so work your granny clusters all the way down, and I'll meet you at the end. Okay, here we are at the end. We are going to slip stitch in the top of this chain. Okay, 1, 2, 3. We're going to slip stitch in the top of this chain. If you want to change your color, I'm going to show you how to do that now. Okay, so we slip stitched. Now we're not in the corner space where we want to be, right, to start working our next row. So we have to slip stitch over to get into this corner space. If I can keep my yarn on my hook. So let's slip stitch over into this corner space. Okay. Now we're going to slip stitch into, oh, you see where I had to knot my yarn together. We can slip stitch into, but before you pull up this yarn, get your new color that you want to use. And where did it go? Here it is. I'm going to go with a darker purple. All right, get your new color that you want to use and just lay it over your hook. Okay, and what we want to do is we want to pull through our existing color and our new color together. You might have to hold your new color a little taut. Slip stitch both of them through. You see how I did that? Got my new color, got my existing color on here. Now, take your hook out, put it back into your existing color. Now we can pull that through. Let me get my knot in through there too, because I had to knot my yarn. Tie that down. Now we can go in with our new color. And we're in a corner space. So you're going to chain one, and in this corner space, this is our chain foundation row. So what we're going to do here is single crochet, chain 3, and single crochet into our corner, because we're in a corner. We're going to chain 3 to accommodate this cluster below us. And that's what you do. Every time you see a cluster below you and you're in this foundation row, you chain 3 Anchor that down in between those granny clusters with a single crochet, chain 3. Anchor that down, chain 3. Now we're in a corner. We're going to single crochet, chain 3, single crochet, all into this corner. And single crochet. Every time you come across the cluster, you need to chain 3 to accommodate that. Single crochet in between. So keep doing that all the way down, and I'll meet you at this next corner down here to show you how to turn that again with your foundation chain, or with your, well, it is a foundation chain. I'll meet you here. Okay, here we are at the corner again, and with the corner, single crochet, chain 3, single crochet. And back in for a single crochet. That's how you do your corners always. Chain 3, single crochet, chain 3. This is your row repeat. Single crochet, chain 3 to accommodate these. Corner again. Single crochet, chain 3, single crochet into this corner. And if you want to continue doing that all the way to the end, I'll show you how to join this foundation row of chain 3s again. Okay, I'll meet you down here. Okay, here we are at the end, and when you do a color change it can get a little crowded in here, but we already did our chain 3 to accommodate this cluster right here, and we're going to slip stitch into that first single crochet. And like I said, because of our color change it could get a little crowded in there, but just do your best to get into that single crochet and do your slip stitch. Okay, now remember, we're not in the right space that we need to be to start, so we need to slip stitch again into our actual chain space, and now we can start our next row of granny clusters. And that of course is in your corners, it's a granny cluster, chain 1, granny cluster, and then you just start making granny clusters around your chains again. Okay, let me do this corner with you real quick. Chain up 3, double crochet, there's our first cluster, chain 1, make another granny cluster, and there's your corner. Our little tail ends out of the way so you can see. And that's what we do. And you can change your colors as many times as you want to. For a baby blanket, chaining 22 is good enough to still make it rectangular, but not so big that you know you're losing some of the pattern. All right. Again, chaining 31 in the beginning for a larger blanket seems to be the right aesthetic look if you want to, but you figure out how you want to do it, and I hope to see it.